Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. My friends call me David because that's my name legally and they have to. The 2025 election is coming up and you may be wondering who you'd like to vote for, and that requires research. I've just read the policy pages for every single political party registered federally in Australia. I'm going to give you a summary of them right now to help you on your decision-making journey. There will be no jokes or personal commentary. This is just a straightforward basic summary of the policies of every single party. Who you vote for is entirely up to you. I just want you to be informed when you vote. Now, occasionally parties change names, get deregistered, or are only registered on a state or territory level. So if anyone is going to say in the comments, hey, you forgot to mention the blah blah party, no I didn't. If someone is not on this list, they were not registered federally at the time of recording. So we didn't forget anyone, okay? Things change over time. Speaking of changing over time, this is for the 2025 election. So naturally, details of this list will change over time. Perhaps more policies will be announced closer to an election. So this is just a broad overview designed to give you an impression. And I highly recommend you check out the websites of different political parties to learn more details and see what couldn't be included for the sake of time. And of course, look up any independents in your area as well. Those people can't be included in this list for obvious reasons. Though, caveat, some people on this list are basically independents who have a political party registered. They are included for the sake of this being a list of every single political party. Another important thing to know is not every single party will run in your area, so check out aec.gov.au to find out what candidates you could potentially vote for. And one final quick note before I begin, there are some sections that include specific wording and phrasing from the policies as they were written on the website to preserve the intention of the party. Some elements are actually just copy-pasted. That doesn't necessarily mean that I myself would use that phrasing or terminology. It's just to give you a more accurate impression, an idea of what they talk about and how. And it's up to you to judge if that's something that you agree with or disagree with. Now, with all that housekeeping, let's get into it. Here they are in alphabetical order with some slight reshuffling. The policies of every single political party in Australia. The Animal Justice Party. They're a progressive party focused on animal welfare. They seek to recognise animals' needs, capabilities and interests, as well as having greater protections for living standards of animals. This includes, but is not limited to, banning greyhound racing, phasing out animal experimentation, and an eventual end to animal agriculture on the grounds that it's harmful to both animals and the environment. Not all of their policies are about animals. Some include urgent climate action through a focus on plant agriculture, environmental rehabilitation, and an end of fossil fuel subsidies and a renewable energy transition. They support access to abortion, raising the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14, welcoming refugees to Australia, and the decriminalisation of cannabis. Australian Christians. They are a right-wing party focused on conservative Christian values. They want to expand religious freedoms by ensuring religious schools are exempt from anti-discrimination laws and expanding chaplain programs to more schools. They want education reform so the curriculum is based on Judeo-Christian values instead of radical ideologies. They want limited government and to reduce regulation on businesses. They welcome refugees, but specifically want to create a special assistance visa category for persecuted Christians and other minorities. They're pro-life, they're against abortion and voluntary assisted dying laws. They're anti-LGBT+ rights, such as marriage equality or transgender rights. And they're against vaccine mandates. Australian Citizens Party. Their policies are mainly about national independence and self-sufficient domestic industry. A central focus of theirs is also preserving the use of physical cash. They want to establish a public postal bank to operate out of Australia Post to ensure people have access to both cash and don't need to rely on central and private banks. They then want to use the postal bank to invest in infrastructure and housing projects, domestic manufacturing and family farms, and end a reliance on foreign borrowing. They're against AUKUS and want independent foreign policy from the US and UK. They're pro-republic, want to ban corporate donations and only let individuals donate, return to state ownership of electricity and reverse privatisation, and they also publish pamphlets on various topics, including ones that make the claim that Elizabeth II ordered the assassination of Princess Diana, and claim that environmental policies to reduce carbon emissions are part of a deliberate plan by Prince Philip and others to reduce the world population. Australian Democrats. They are a centrist party founded in 1977 by former Liberal Minister Don Chipp, who promised to keep the bastards honest. They want truth in political advertising laws. They also want to raise the tax-free threshold from $18,200 to $45,000 a year. They want to reduce the capital gains tax discount from 50% to 25% to slow down the increase in housing prices. Raise welfare above the poverty line. They're pro-refugees and against offshore detention and boat turnbacks, anti-nuclear energy and anti-nuclear weapons, pro-LGBTQIA+ rights like banning conversion practices, and want age-appropriate education programs to promote inclusion for all children and their families, including at faith schools. For climate action, they want a 55% emissions reduction by 2030, a 20% super profits tax on non-renewable resource extraction, a carbon price, and to end fossil fuel subsidies. They want to establish a constitutional reform body to guide constitutional change on many things, including becoming a republic, recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as First Nations peoples, and fixing government terms, as well as many other ideas. The Australian Greens. They're left-wing, socially progressive, whose main focuses are environmental policy and increasing spending on public services. The Greens are also the largest minor party in Australia. They want to declare a climate emergency, stop new coal and gas projects, end fossil fuel subsidies, achieve 100% renewable energy to reduce electricity prices as soon as possible. They want to expand Medicare to include dental, psychology appointments, and ADHD and autism diagnoses. They also want universal free childcare, to wipe HECS debt and reinstate free university and TAFE, phase out tax handouts to investors such as negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount, then use the money saved to create a government-owned developer to build 610,000 public and affordable homes over the next decade to be sold or rented at affordable prices. They want to get rid of unlimited rental increases and instead have a maximum of 2% increase every 2 years. Make supermarket price gouging illegal and break up the Coles and Woolworths duopoly, raise Centrelink payments above the poverty line, tax billionaires, corporation super profits, and end tax loopholes for oil and gas companies to raise hundreds of billions of dollars. They also want to establish a First Nations Truth-Telling Commission and preserve native languages. They are pro-LGBTQIA+ rights, pro-disability rights and increasing funding to the NDIS. They want to lower the voting age to 16 and legalise cannabis. They want a permanent ceasefire and the end to the occupation of the Palestinian territories. They want full equality before the law for every person in Palestine and Israel, and for the Australian government to end all military exports to Israel, and also leave AUKUS and cancel the nuclear submarine deal with the US that has a projected cost of $268 to $368 billion. The Australian Labor Party. They're a centre-left major party. They are also the oldest extant party in Australia, founded by the union movement in the 1890s, and because of this has focused on workers' rights, though has diversified since. Their platform is on boosting public services, like increasing funding for Medicare for an additional 18 million bulk billed GP visits every year. They want to open 50 more Medicare urgent care clinics so most Australians live within a 20-minute drive of one. They want to reduce the cost of prescriptions on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme from $31.60 to $25. Open 11 more endometriosis and pelvic pain clinics. Expand the Help to Buy program to help first home buyers. It's a program where the government pays up to 40% shared equity of a property to reduce mortgage repayments, but allows you then to buy that shared equity off later, or allow the government to have part of the capital gains when you sell the property in the future. They also want to introduce a 2-year ban on foreign investors buying existing homes, provide $120 million from the National Productivity Fund to incentivize states to remove red tape and help more homes be built faster, additional tax cuts to those they've already legislated during this term by reducing the lowest tax bracket from 16% to 14% over 2 years, affecting all 14 million Australian income taxpayers. Provide a $150 energy bill relief for Australian homes and businesses for cost of living help, $2.3 billion in subsidies to allow homes to buy solar batteries at a 30% discount so they can save up to 90% on electricity bills through these batteries, and also support for small businesses to buy batteries in the hopes of getting 1 million more solar batteries by 2030. $1 billion for household energy upgrades to increase energy efficiency, an $800 million social housing energy performance initiative to reduce energy bills for social housing, more investment in renewable energy to achieve 82% renewable energy by 2030 to reduce electricity prices and carbon emissions, make supermarket price gouging illegal, cut student debt by 20% and raise the repayment threshold and lower repayment rates, make TAFE permanently free, and provide $20 million to support Australian producers through the Buy Australian campaign, aiming to encourage consumers to buy Australian-made products. Australia's Voice. They are a centre party founded in 2024 by former Labor Senator for WA, Fatima Payman. She resigned after crossing the floor to vote in support of recognising Palestinian statehood, while Labor voted against the motion. The party wants to end the genocide of the Palestinian people. They also want to improve housing affordability by reducing tax incentives for investors, by limiting negative gearing, and reducing the capital gains discount from 50% to 25%, then lowering it by 5% each year for over 5 years and redirect the billions saved into social housing. Break up Coles and Woolworths to increase competition in supermarkets to reduce grocery prices. They're also pro-Republic. They want to reduce political perks like travel allowances and freeze MP pay rises. They propose that Parliament should vote before we go to war, instead of it being a decision for the Prime Minister, and also scrap AUKUS. They want to maintain greater reserves of gas supply for domestic use instead of foreign exports to reduce local gas prices, raise welfare above the poverty line, automatically split couples' superannuation in cases of abuse and domestic violence so those fleeing abuse can secure a financial future, and treat climate change as an emergency. Better Together Party. The party consists of Lucy Bradlow and Bronwyn Brock, who are running in the Senate in Victoria. However, they want to do something that is a world first: job sharing a single Senate seat. The idea is for them to both run as a joint unit for just one Senate position, and if successful, have one of them work for 1 week, then the other work the next week, and so on, back and forth, and then split the salary, allowances, and responsibility evenly. Their aim is to demonstrate a way to do politics through a more equitable work-life balance and broaden representation. It also may not be constitutional, and as of recording there's a challenge before the federal court to determine the legality of such an arrangement, and it's unclear what will happen if their attempt to have a joint nomination for a single seat is rejected. But for the sake of completeness, regardless of what arrangement they run under, their policies are as such. They want strong action on climate change and an accelerated transition to renewable energy and electrification. They want the government to crack down on anti-competitive behaviour in the groceries and energy sector to reduce the cost of living. They want to work with state and local governments to increase housing supply. They want greater power for the National Anti-Corruption Commission, real-time disclosures of any donation above $2,000, want to promote gender equality and women's safety, with proper funding to combat domestic abuse and violence against women, and adequate funding for first responders. They want generous and equal access to paid parental leave that includes superannuation to encourage both men and women to take parental leave, and create pipeline opportunities that will reduce highly gendered industries. Centre Alliance. It's a centre-aligned party based in South Australia. It was originally founded in 2013 as the Nick Xenophon team. It's gone through a few iterations and previous members, but now the only MP is Rebecca Jacqui, who effectively is sitting as an independent for the seat of Mayo, but has kept the party registration. She is the only member running for this party. So for the people of Mayo, she wants antitrust laws to break up the Coles and Woolies duopoly and increase competition. Increase funding for regional health services and regional public transport, is open to a conversation about nuclear power as a part of our broader discussion about long-term energy solutions, but in the short term wants to improve affordability of home solar batteries. She also wants to end gambling advertising and compel gambling apps to share real-time information to people on how much they are losing. Protect our biodiversity and reduce plastic pollution. More funding for childcare based off areas with the greatest need, preserve local farmland and support local grown food and local manufacturing, and says new housing in regions must be sympathetic to the environment, complementary to existing housing, and supported by appropriate transit and social infrastructure. She supports affordable housing options, particularly for the elderly and disadvantaged. The Coalition. The Coalition is a combination of the Liberals, the Nationals, and the Country Liberal Party in the Northern Territory. In Queensland, the Liberals and Nationals fused to form the Liberal National Party, or LNP, but federally LNP members can choose to sit as either Liberals or Nationals. Overall, the parties are centre-right to right-wing and socially conservative. They have a formal agreement to work together in government and opposition, with the exception of the Nationals in WA, which isn't part of the coalition and sits separately on the crossbench. When in government, the usual arrangement is that the leader of the Liberals is the Prime Minister, while the leader of the Nationals is the Deputy Prime Minister. While they formulate shared policies, they each have their own focus and contributions to the coalition. So I'm going to break down some of that. The Country Liberal Party from the Northern Territory. It only runs in the Northern Territory and hopes to achieve statehood for the territory. Its values include traditional conservative values and liberal values of individualism. Their platform involves being tough on crime by having tougher bail laws, keeping the age of criminal responsibility at 10, and building more prisons. They want to attract and keep more frontline workers in the Northern Territory through federal tax breaks and migration exemptions, including changes to the zone tax offset and designated area migration agreement, or DAMA. The Liberal Party of Australia. They are the largest of the coalition parties. They run mainly, but not exclusively, in metropolitan areas. They want to reduce spending on public services while favouring the growth of private industry through reduction of regulation and cutting red tape. Their energy policy is to greatly increase domestic gas production in the immediate term, while invest in nuclear energy for the long term, with the goal of building nuclear power plants in at least 15 to 20 years' time. They want to reduce the power of unions in the workplace, introduce a $20,000 tax deduction for businesses to spend on meals and entertainment, allow people to access their superannuation early to help pay for a house deposit, invest $5 billion for housing infrastructure, freeze changes to the National Construction Code for 10 years, introduce a 2-year ban on foreign investors buying existing homes, reduce permanent immigration from 185,000 to 140,000 for 2 years, then gradually increase it 150,000 in year 3 and 160,000 in year 4. Reduce foreign student numbers. Work with states and territories for uniform and tough knife laws and tougher bail laws, crack down on what they say are anti-Semitic student protests, and remove woke agendas from educational curriculums. They also want to invest $9 billion into more bulk billing GP visits and halve the fuel excise for 12 months, reducing the cost of petrol by 25 cents a litre. The National Party. They're focused on regional and country areas of Australia and as a result run mainly in those areas. They support regional families and industries like agriculture and mining. Similar to the Liberals, their energy policy is about increasing gas supply to reduce prices. They want to crack down on supermarket price gouging by creating a supermarket commissioner, $2 million on-the-spot fines, and big stick competition laws that deliver fairer prices for farmers at the farm gate and families at the checkout. They want more GPs, specialists and nurses practicing in country areas by increasing incentives and opportunities for medical professionals to train, live and work in the regions. They want more investment in regional road, bridge and water infrastructure. National Party of WA. Again, focused on supporting regional and country areas and agricultural and mining industries. But just a reminder that if a Nationals WA member was elected federally, they'd sit on the crossbench, not with the coalition. However, they do have similar ideas to the other Nationals branches in that they want investment in regional development, water security, property rights for farmers, and want to attract and retain professionals like teachers in regional areas. Daly and Frank Carbone, WSC. Formed in 2023 by Daly, a former Liberal member who is serving both as the federal member for Fowler as well as currently the Deputy Mayor for Fairfield City Council, in combination with Frank Carbone, a former Labor member and current Mayor of Fairfield. While Daly is part of the party, she sits as an independent in the federal parliament, but labels herself as a real independent, as opposed to teal independence because she has no backing by Climate 200, a climate-focused funding body. WSC stands for Western Sydney Community, and it's the aim of the party to improve infrastructure for that area, such as rail and bus services to the Western Sydney Airport, more funding for parks, walkways and bike paths, and a MRI machine at Fairfield Hospital. They want to increase the Medicare rebate for working families, create incentives for GPs to work in communities like Fowler. Just as regional GPs receive extra support, so should there be incentives for lower socioeconomic areas. They also want to support small businesses and local jobs by increasing the instant asset write-off to $50,000. Make arts and social science university degrees cheaper by reducing the maximum amount that students can be charged from $15,142 down to $4,124 a unit. They also want to reform the energy generation and retail market to support a fairer, more efficient energy sector, cut the fuel excise and raise the tax-free threshold as cost of living relief measures. David Pocock. It's a progressive party founded in 2021 by former rugby union member turned senator for the ACT, David Pocock. While he sits as an independent in the Senate, he registered a political party so he could appear above the line on the Senate ballot. He wants greater investment in public services and institutions, so more funding for infrastructure, health, education, the ABC, mental health services, specialist care, the NDIS, and aged care. They want to legislate a duty of care for young people and future generations when it comes to climate change and the environment, as well as investment for homes to transition from gas to electrification to reduce emissions and energy bills, and wants an ambitious 2035 emissions reduction target. They also want to increase competition for key industries like supermarkets, airlines and banks, greater powers for the federal anti-corruption watchdog, truth in political advertising laws, quadruple the Housing Future Fund to $40 billion, and welcome back international students to help address workforce shortages and increase Canberra's appeal on the international stage to attract and retain staff locally. Family First Party. They're Christian conservatives who focus on social issues and deregulation. They're pro-life. They're anti-LGBTQI+ rights, including removing any LGBTQI+ materials from schools, banning puberty blockers and gender-affirming care for children, removing trans people from sports. They're against diversity training, which they describe as coercive and woke. They want to abolish anti-vilification and anti-discrimination laws on the grounds that it restricts freedom of speech and freedom of religion. They want to make the criminal justice system prioritise rehabilitation programs for young people instead of prison for first offences. They also want to provide tax incentives to encourage married couples to have children, mandate age verification measures to protect children from adult content online. They doubt the legitimacy of climate change and are against a net zero target. Instead, they support more gas for energy and want to lift restrictions on exploration. They also support coal and nuclear energy. They want to examine Hungarian-style tax breaks for mothers of 3 or more children. They want to phase out poker machines and want a royal commission into the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fusion, planet rescue, whistleblower protection, innovation. They're a fusion of the Science Party, Pirate Party, Secular Party, Climate Emergency Action Alliance, and Climate Change Justice Party, which combined in 2021 when the requirement for party registration rose from 500 to 1,500 members. They focus on science investment, environmental action, secular humanism, and reforms to intellectual property and copyright laws. They want to reverse climate change and revert to pre-industrial CO2 levels, reach 800% renewable energy so Australia can become a powerhouse for energy exports, end fossil fuel extraction in 2 years, create a closed-loop economy for sustainability, invest in research and development for future technologies, including overturning the ban on nuclear power for the purpose of research into fusion energy. They want to fully fund all levels of schooling, ensure publicly funded research is open access to allow free use by others, treat housing as a human right and reduce tax incentives for investors, triple public housing supply, add basic mental health, dental health and gender-affirming care into Medicare, implement a universal basic income, are pro-LGBTQIA+ rights, and want to remove religious prayers, rituals and bias from government and public institutions and abolish blasphemy laws. They also want to abolish the school chaplains program and replace it with a youth counselling program. They want to introduce real-time disclosures of political donations above $1,000 for greater transparency, and reform copyright and intellectual property laws, which they argue are meant to protect authors and creators for a limited time to encourage creative activity, but are currently being used to eliminate competition through litigation. Gerard Rennick People First. It's a Conservative party, founded by Queensland Senator Gerard Rennick, who was originally elected as a member of the Liberal National Party, but resigned in 2024 to sit as an independent before creating the party. They want various tax reforms, including raising the income tax-free threshold from $18,200 a year to $40,000. Change capital gains tax to indexation averaged over the life of the holding as a disincentive to speculative investment, abolish payroll tax, allow superannuation to be voluntary, establish a public bank, insurance office, and a domestic infrastructure bank to avoid Australia's reliance on foreign capital for infrastructure projects. They want to abolish HECS for teachers and nurses. They support coal, nuclear gas and hydro energy, and want to abolish renewable energy subsidies, put strong regulations in to protect agricultural land from large-scale renewable energy projects, limit immigration to under 100,000 work visas a year, reduce foreign students, and deny welfare benefits to foreign-born citizens for a minimum of 10 years. They want to leave the Paris Agreement and withdraw from the World Health Organization. They also want to abolish the Climate Change Department and Multicultural Department, remove all funding and references to climate change, and charge a 10% royalty on renewable energy to pay for end-of-life cleanup and site rehabilitation of renewable energy infrastructure to protect the environment. And put freedom of speech in the Constitution via referendum. Health Environmental Accountability Rights Transparency, or HART. Previously, the Involuntary Medical Objectors (vaccination/fluoride) party then rebranded to Informed Medical Opinions. Now it is HART. They're focused around promoting alternative medicine and naturopathy. They're against fluoride in the water and are against vaccines. They want there to be independent safety studies into emerging technologies like 5G to find out if there are any negative health effects. They're for small government, so they want to lower taxes, are anti-regulation, and are against what they describe as so-called safety practices. They call for transparent information regarding the possible environmental effects of current and future renewable energy sources and the impact of mining and fracking on the environment. They want a royal commission into the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. They want to challenge and reassess our inclusion in the World Health Organization and the United Nations. They want a Bill of Rights or Federal Human Rights Act to protect our rights, including freedom of speech, association, religion, movement, freedom from surveillance, medical freedom, the right to privacy, the right to data privacy, including the use of facial recognition and other biometrics, the right to make anonymous transactions, and the right to use cash for any transaction. Indigenous Aboriginal Party of Australia. Their policies are centred on addressing a lack of action on cultural, spiritual and social interests of Aboriginal people. They want more protection for the environment, such as maintaining the health of our rivers. They want to return to traditional ways of caring for country. They are against children being taken from their families unless they're at immediate risk, and propose intensive in-home support from highly trained Indigenous peers or elders to be provided instead. They wish to reduce incarcerations by using jail as a last resort for serious offences and focus more on prevention and community service, and want no juveniles in jail. They want Indigenous control of Indigenous school education, so cultural identity, traditional language and a sense of belonging to place can be fostered. They wish to protect sacred sites and to also allow residents in remote communities to design and build their own homes so the communities themselves can maintain them. They want to write a treaty and achieve constitutional recognition. The Jacqui Lambie Network. Founded by the titular Jacqui Lambie, a Tasmanian senator, back in 2015 after leaving the Palmer United Party. Lambie served in the ADF until a spinal injury in 1997. As such, she has a focus on veterans' affairs and their welfare. The party also focuses on working class issues, pensioners and welfare recipients, referred to as Aussie battlers. They are socially conservative. They want a national gas reservation policy to reduce electricity prices, as well as freezing foreign investment in residential properties. They support Australian manufacturing of steel, batteries and other products. They want solar batteries for social housing to reduce power bills for the most disadvantaged, enhance our corporate anti-competition laws, crack down on multinational tax avoidance, produce programs for young people to grow their self-worth, teach lost values and prevent a cycle of crime. They want to crack down on foreign interference, especially from the Chinese government, and protect national assets like agricultural land and water from foreign ownership. They want to increase transparency for political donation laws to have a real-time disclosure threshold of $2,500 and regulate lobbying more and have stricter registration and disclosure laws. Katter's Australian Party. They're a conservative, country-focused party founded by Queensland MP Bob Katter. Their focus is regional issues and crime. They want to reduce youth crime by sending youth offenders to remote-located facilities to be taught vocational and social skills. They also want to introduce castle law to recognise a person's right to defend their home against intruders without legal consequences. They want youth offenders who commit heinous and violent crimes to be tried and sentenced as adults. They want to restore coal and gas power stations and abandon an emissions reduction target and invest in nuclear energy. They want to force divestiture of the supermarkets to increase competition in the market and reduce grocery prices. They also want to reduce supermarkets to a maximum markup amount. For housing, they want to abolish stamp duty and broaden the first home owners grant. They are pro-responsible firearm ownership for primary producers, hunters, recreational shooters, target shooters, collectors, and occupational users. They want to give landowners the power to manage crocodile numbers on their land and legalise crocodile egg harvesting, like in the Northern Territory, and create inalienable title deeds for First Australians in community areas. Kim for Canberra. Kim Rubenstein is a progressive legal scholar, lawyer and professor at the University of Canberra whose political focus is on climate change and gender equality. She registered this political party for the 2022 election, but when I contacted her to learn more about her policies, she said she wasn't running again in 2025, even though the party is still registered as of recording. So that's why it's on this list. Legalise Cannabis Australia. They want Australia to legalise cannabis. They argue that legalisation reduces crime and money spent on policing cannabis can be saved or used elsewhere. They also say it's a human rights issue, as treating cannabis as a crime has resulted in human rights violations disproportionately affecting the most marginalised in society. They also want to promote the economic benefit of regulating and taxing the sale of cannabis, promote the medicinal benefits and use of cannabis, and promote hemp for its positive environmental impact as both a fast-growing crop that can sequester carbon and its potential use as an organic replacement for plastic, as well as its use for building materials. They also have a list of values to uphold that would shape how they vote on non-cannabis related bills. They value civil liberties, privacy, human rights, personal freedoms, anti-discrimination and tolerance, and compassion. The Libertarian Party. They promote libertarianism, which is the belief in individualism free of, or with minimal interference from, the government. This involves a large amount of reduction in government services, spending and regulation in favour of privatisation. They want to abolish or scale back government agencies and regulatory bodies, such as abolishing the E-Safety Commissioner and cutting the Australian Tax Office workforce in half. They want to enshrine freedom of speech in the Constitution by referendum, repeal Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act 1975, and repeal misinformation and disinformation legislation. Privatise the ABC and SBS, maintain a strong military for national defence, pursue independent foreign policy free from the influence of other states or international organisations, including withdrawing from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and World Health Organization. They want to raise the income tax-free threshold to $50,000 for individuals and $100,000 for couples, index it to inflation, and have a flat tax rate of 20% of income above this. Also reduce the company tax rate to 0 and tax distributed earnings at 20%. They want to make superannuation voluntary, abolish renewable energy targets, repeal ban on nuclear energy, protect public land from wind and solar developments that they say harm the environment, abolish the Federal Department of Education, allow families to choose their child's education with a school voucher system, repeal any kind of transgender protections and restrict access to gender-affirming medical care, reduce immigration and limit short-term visas to a maximum of 5 years, and restrict welfare to only citizens. Pauline Hanson's One Nation. They're right-wing to far-right, nationalist and populist, founded by the titular Pauline Hanson in 1997 after being kicked out of the Liberal Party. They want to reduce immigration by capping visas at $130,000 a year, make essential services such as power, water, telecommunications, roadways and ports off limits to foreign investors, and end the sale of property to non-residents and non-citizens. Introduce an 8-year waiting period for citizenship and access to welfare if you're an immigrant. Remove Western white gender guilt shaming from the classroom. Enshrine freedom of speech in the Constitution by referendum. Have a 5-year moratorium on charging GST on building materials to reduce the cost of new housing and support the construction industry for new homes up to the value of $1 million. Remove mandatory disability compliance requirements for all new homes. Change the national electricity market rules to incentivize more coal and gas while supporting nuclear energy. One Nation questions the legitimacy of climate change science and wishes to abolish the Department of Climate Change and related agencies and programs. They also want to abolish the National Indigenous Australians Agency, withdraw from international agreements such as the United Nations, World Health Organization, and Paris Agreement, and the UN Refugee Convention. They want to improve national water security by upgrading water infrastructure to improve storage capacity and conservation, halve the fuel excise for 3 years, increase the Medicare rebate, and are pro-medicinal cannabis, pro-responsible firearm ownership, and they wish to boost regional health professionals by introducing 3-year contracts for newly qualified professionals and in return pay their HECS debt in full. Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. They're a country-focused right-wing party. They support the expansion of recreational access and use of public lands and waters for shooting and fishing. They oppose the creation or expansion of marine park networks, support sustainable wild-caught commercial fishing operations. They want to promote outdoor recreation activities in schools, including target shooting, hunting, fishing, horse riding, bushwalking, and birdwatching. They want to facilitate Indigenous traditional uses on public lands, reduce and remove regulation on responsible gun ownership while shifting the focus to greater penalties for the use of illegal firearms. They're skeptical of climate change and say that environmental policies should not unnecessarily restrict the activities of farmers, resources, transport, manufacturing, or any other industry, nor have any unjustified impact on the economy. They want a national gas reservation policy to increase gas supply and develop nuclear energy. They also want a well-funded defence force with nuclear deterrence capabilities. They support expansion of mining industries in appropriate locations so long as it doesn't permanently affect prime agricultural land or water systems. They also want to give farmers the right to refuse mining operations, and they support reasonable measures to reduce market dominance and increase competition in the retail sector, covering basic items such as groceries, fuel, and liquor. They want big businesses to pay their fair share of corporate tax and increase funding for regional and remote early learning centres, communication infrastructure, and homelessness and drug addiction research. They also want an immediate review of the impact of immigration on domestic infrastructure and housing. Socialist Alliance. They're socialist, so left-wing to far left, and are pro-public ownership and anti-privatisation and anti-capitalism. They want to nationalise mines, banks, energy companies, and other critical infrastructure, and reverse privatisation of public assets. They want to end subsidies to private health insurers and fossil fuel companies, provide free universal health care, including dental and gender-affirming care, free public education at all levels, raise welfare above the poverty line, put politicians and government officials on an average worker's wage, and ban the use of private consultants in government agencies. They also want to abolish anti-protest and anti-union laws, introduce a 30-hour work week, cut military spending by at least 50%, and massively increase development and climate change aid to poor countries. They want to withdraw from AUKUS and close all US military bases in Australia. They oppose nuclear submarines, energy weapons, and uranium mining. They support the liberation of Palestine through boycott, divestment, and sanctions on Israel. They want to negotiate treaties with First Nations peoples and end the disproportionate separation of First Nations children from their families. For climate change, they want to shift to 100% renewable energy within 5 to 10 years through public investment and emission reduction targets. They want to invest in a large-scale, quality public housing building program, establish a Bill of Rights for renters, including a ban on no-grounds evictions. They want to cap private rents for 10 years and make public and social housing rents no more than 20% of a renter's income. Make all discrimination against LGBTQIA+ people illegal, with no support for religious exemptions. Uphold kind treatment and rights of refugees. In terms of taxation, they want to raise the income tax-free threshold to $56,000 a year and introduce a 70% tax rate for incomes over $300,000. Introduce a wealth tax on the super rich and increase company tax to 49% and establish an additional super profits tax. Abolish tax incentives for investors such as the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing. Sustainable Australia, universal basic income. Their aim is to slow and then stabilise Australia's population growth to a target of below 30 million people to around 2050 and onwards to preserve the environment. They want to reduce immigration to 70,000 per year and provide free universal access to contraception and related family planning. They want to use a broader Genuine Progress Indicator, or GPI, as a key measure of Australia's progress that redefines growth and prioritises growth in health and well-being, not growth in consumption and population, as is encouraged by the current GDP measure. They also want universal basic income, so every Australian can live above the poverty line. They also want to create a full employment guarantee program. They want free and universal access to university and TAFE for all Australian citizens, dental in Medicare, ban all new coal mines and fracking, adopt a resource super profit tax for iron ore and coal, end multinational tax avoidance. They want to protect animal habitats and welfare by funding and enforcing a national biodiversity and native species program. They also want more transparency in reporting political lobbying and financial contributions. They want to diversify the economy and promote self-sufficiency, transition Australia to a zero-waste economy and create repair centres for recycling of electronic waste and household goods, impose a limit on future foreign investment to a maximum of 25% of Australian natural resources, abolish negative gearing and the capital gains discount to help housing affordability, but grandfather existing arrangements. They want to protect important assets from privatisation and renationalise essential services. They also support science literacy in education and funding of institutions like the CSIRO. Tammy Tyrell for Tasmania. Tammy Tyrell was elected as a Tasmanian senator for the Jacqui Lambie network but left the party in 2024. The party is against regulatory ways to tackle misinformation online but says we should rely more on digital literacy education so people are less likely to fall for misinformation. They are also pro-legalising cannabis. They're against a new stadium in Hobart and instead argue that money should be spent on housing. They want to expand access to affordable childcare. They support the salmon farming industry in Tasmania and want to streamline the administration of superannuation. The Great Australian Party. Their policies are a mix of right-wing ideas like anti-immigration and left-wing ideas like nationalisation of industry and opposition to privatisation. It was founded in 2019 by former One Nation member Rodney Cullerton, who was briefly a senator for Western Australia before being disqualified by the High Court due to bankruptcy. Cullerton denies the validity of his disqualification. The Great Australian Party questions the validity of the creation of the Federal Court, claims the Australia Act of 1986 was illegal, and doesn't believe that local government is a legitimate tier of government. They want to promote the restoration and preservation of the Commonwealth Constitution Act. They oppose transferring Telstra and telemarketing services offshore in the pursuit of globalism. They want to create a strong national legislative framework for the protection of the welfare of animals. They don't want the analogue TV broadcasting system to be replaced by digital until such time that it is proven that digital is a technologically superior and more economical service. They support freedom of the press, which they want to remove from the control of United Nations treaties. They want to limit foreign investment in the nation's energy system to 49%. They want propane to be priced at 1/3 the price of unleaded petrol to encourage its use as an alternative fuel. They oppose the sale of uranium yellowcake and fracking. They're against the Kyoto Accords and carbon taxes. They're pro-gun ownership and for the culling of feral animals in national parks by sporting shooters. They want net zero immigration. They promote turning back boats carrying asylum seekers before they enter Australian waters, and they want to withdraw from United Nations treaties on migration and refugees. They want people's-initiated referenda by petition with a minimum of 5,000 signatures to be considered, and want to make the Nuremberg Code law in Australia. Trumpet of Patriots. They are a far-right nationalist party registered in 2024 after a merger with the Federation Party to have enough members for registration. Mining billionaire Clive Palmer joined after he couldn't re-register the United Australia Party before the 2025 election. Its policies are modelled heavily on US President Donald Trump's, such as massive cuts to government services and spending. They want to establish an Australian DOGE, a Department of Government Efficiency, much like the one that Elon Musk is in charge of in the US. Through that, they want to drain the swamp and cut what they label as wasteful spending, such as welcome to country ceremonies. They want to cut regulation on private industry, cut immigration and prioritise migration from nations with compatible values, limit the ability of foreign buyers from buying Australian homes and agricultural land. allow Australians to use 30% of their superannuation for a housing deposit and cap interest rates at 3%. They want to end government subsidies of energy and let the free market decide how to best create an energy grid. However, they are anti-renewable energy and want to open more coal-fired power plants. They are against net zero emissions targets and want to exit the Paris Agreement, as they say environmental policies won't change the climate but will harm the economy. They're against supporting Ukraine in its struggle against the Russian invasion. They claim that the Liberal Party is moving towards left-wing woke politics and that the school system is pushing far-left woke ideology. They're anti-trans rights, against digital IDs and central bank digital currency. They want to make cash compulsory at all businesses, and in their words, globalism is the scourge of the free world, and they want Australia to exit the World Health Organization, United Nations, and World Economic Forum because, as they say, we cannot have unelected globalist bodies dictating how we run our nation and our lives. They want to promote an isolationist approach to international conflict, avoiding anything that doesn't directly impact Australia's national interest. Victorian Socialists. Their policies focus on nationalising key industries, public ownership of utilities, and taxing corporations and the wealthy to pay for social services, as well as the end of capitalism. They believe workers should collectively own and democratically control their workplaces, including the right to elect and fire management. They want to treat housing as a human right instead of promoting private ownership for personal profit, and establish a public builder to construct 1 million new quality public housing units over the next decade. They want to freeze rent increases for 5 years and seize properties left vacant for more than 12 months without a reason and allocate them to those on the public housing waitlist. They want to renationalise the Commonwealth Bank and Telstra, repeal anti-protest laws used to target climate activists. They want to create a publicly owned renewable energy operator to reduce electricity prices and transition to zero emissions by 2035. They want no nuclear energy, no new coal or gas projects, and ban coal-fired power by 2030, as well as impose a climate tax on big polluters. They want to cap prices for essential grocery items, electricity and gas bills, put politicians on average workers' wage, end discrimination against LGBTQIA+ people and remove exemptions on religious grounds. They oppose militarism and war, oppose nuclear weapons and AUKUS, and want Australia to end its support for Israel on the grounds of its oppression of the Palestinian people. They want to make state education free. They also want free and universal healthcare, including dental and mental health and Medicare, as well as gender-affirming care. They want to end the privileging of business interests over Indigenous land rights via treaties that include the right to veto mining, and they also want to fund schools to teach Aboriginal languages and uphold Aboriginal rights. They want to shift the tax burden from the working class and move it on to the capitalist and upper classes. They want to end tax handouts that benefit investors like negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount, and also increase company tax to 50%, create a 90% income tax rate for those earning over $300,000 a year, and crack down on tax avoidance. And there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's a very long episode, but I hope you now have a better understanding of who you would like to vote for. But also, again, I do encourage you to research more. This is not a comprehensive list. There could be more details and information out there that could shape your vote. So do some more research in other places as well. And also, don't forget to share this so other people can learn as well. Subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below if you think a tomato is a fruit, vegetable, or it doesn't matter because all forms of taxonomy are inherently flawed as categorization creates untenable limits on language and our understanding of the world. Whatever floats your boat. And thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon who are giving a bit of emotional support to me in this stressful time leading up to an election, but also the gift of physical money, which you can contribute to me as a reward for all the hard work I put into this project of Auspol Explained. Or not, it's up to you. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you at the polls.